Welcome to June Tranmer. Thank you, June. This week's Precision podcast. We're moving through menopause. Well, I still am anyway. And so this week, I'm so thrilled to talk to June. June is an acupuncturist, and she's thoroughly qualified. A kinesiologist, you name it, I think she can do it. So, but we're going to talk today about acupuncture. So welcome, June. Thank you for coming along and having a chat.
Well, thank you for having me, Philippa. It's a real thrill. I love talking. But I don't like talking to cameras on their own. I like talking to real people. So this is great.
This is perfect, isn't it? And you know, if we can say something that helps somebody, then all to the good. That's what I think.
Yeah.
So let's dive straight in and talk about acupuncture. Now, I'm a physiotherapist by profession. I think you know this. And I'm trained in Western medical acupuncture. And I must say, I've been doing acupuncture on and off for the last 25 years. And I love acupuncture. Now, unfortunately, one way and another in physiotherapy practice, the NICE guidance has been putting a bit of a dampener on some of the acupuncture that we do in context of the NHS, which is a shame, I think. Hopefully, this is going to change in the not too distant future, but. We're talking about acupuncture. So what is it? What is acupuncture, June?
Well, yeah, just to go back to what you just said, I think NICE has had similar influence on ourselves as traditional Chinese medicine practitioners. We have been told we can and cannot say that we can treat this, that, or the other thing. So what I find interesting is that we're now falling back on the way we used to talk, like 30 odd years ago when I trained. In 1989, I started my training.
Wow.
I would always say, people would say, well, can you treat heart conditions? And I go, yes, but I like to treat the person with the heart condition, not the ailment. My training was very much about the landscape of the body, looking at the acupuncture channels as rivers and streams that all link up with each other, but also have links to the internal organs. And therefore, we're not allowed to diagnose, obviously. That's left to the medical professionals, but we can actually influence, say, for instance, the heart meridian and do the heart good by looking after that and keeping it balanced. And so my feeling is, and my understanding and my experience is that what we're doing is balancing people as a whole person, and therefore all of their symptoms are relevant. They can't just come into us and say, well, I'll just tell you the three main ones. As doctors often say to people these days, I haven't got time to talk to you about everything. Just give me the three main things. And then how do people know what are the three main things? Maybe something really small and not bothering them that much is the key to understanding what else is going on. So I feel a bit like a detective, really, sometimes trying to find out what is going on at the root cause of the symptoms. And that's what I like to think is, we also treat the symptoms. Obviously, if someone comes with a painful shoulder, I treat the painful shoulder, but I also look at the whole picture.
Yeah, it does come down to the individual, doesn't it? And it is continually continues to fascinate me, the interconnectedness of everything. I mean, I think the fact that what we're talking about with acupuncture is most people will be familiar with the images of needles sticking into people. And we're talking about, in the context of traditional acupuncture, you mentioned the energy channels or the meridian channels, and the thinking that energy is flowing through the body, through the channels, and that something gets a little out of balance, and that can create symptoms somewhere in the body, or even in the mind. And that by addressing imbalances, we can resolve problems and restore everything to its normal degree of function. And, and I think increasingly Western medicine is having to acknowledge this interconnectedness of everything, the gut microbiome, how the gut influences the brain, the gut-brain connection. Up until recently, this was something that, that everything from the neck up was in one camp, and anything from the neck down was, totally separate. Functional medicine now, functional medicine doctors are looking at the whole person. And I think this is where we're going to really start to make some inroads in terms of preventing chronic disease. If we can intervene soon enough to balance the systems, the parasympathetic, the sympathetic nervous system, get those into balance. And this would be my a wonderful thing if we could see it in my lifetime, that that people are being viewed in the broadest sense, because everything is interconnected. I mean, if we're talking about menopause, and so if you think of all the 34 symptoms of menopause, from wide-ranging systems in the body, the digestive system, the brain, palpitations, the skin, the genital urinary tract. The fact that these wide-ranging symptoms are all connected to the fact that we're losing estrogen. It seems crazy that you can only go to the doctor with 3, or if you're lucky, normally they want you to narrow it down to one. Discrete problem. And menopause is definitely not like that, is it, June?
No, and that's the beauty of traditional Chinese medicine, because we look at everything in terms of a syndrome. It's not just one problem. It is a collection of things that add up to that. And the menopause is a state of transition, and that's the thing to remember. It's not an illness. It's not the end of our womanhood, as some women see it. It's a transition from childbearing age to being a mature, respected, dare I say it, citizen in the community, a wise woman. And I think we need to bring that back. If we, once upon a time, our culture did have it, and it still is very much present in other cultures in the world, that older women have wisdom. They have experience, they have knowledge, and they're worth listening to.
Oh, absolutely. Yay to that.
Yes.
So how would you go about tackling the symptoms like hot flushes, say, for instance?
Okay, well, on the long list, as you said, of so many things, we can look in Chinese medicine at the imbalances in certain areas. We call them the Zhang Fu, the internal organs, which govern all the meridians. So with the hot flushes, you've got a basic yin-yang kind of imbalance going on there. And really, I mean, if we're talking in Western hormonal groups, you've got your estrogen, your progesterone fighting it out to get to a lower level in both cases. And it's the relationship between the two that is the issue, in my opinion, not just a drop of estrogen, but the progesterone has to drop too. And they need to be in a different sort of a balance once we're past childbearing age. So it's a bumpy road sometimes. But the hot flushes are very much linked with the insomnia, you see.
Oh, yeah.
Because in terms of Chinese medicine, what you've got is the heart energy needs to go down and be cooled at night. Although we do get a little surge of heat, generally speaking, people do during the night. And this is where the yin is not holding the yang down. And the surge of heat becomes too much. The yin is the cool part of us. The yang is the warm, fiery, go-ahead part of us. And I don't like to be too much dualistic about this, but it is a useful way of looking at things. And I definitely don't like to say yin is female and yang is male, because we've all got both in us. And so what we need to do is we need to balance the heart. We need to soothe the heart. And that also again links in with the anxiety. You know, you can change the hot and cold balance in your system with food, because certain foods produce heat in the body and certain foods cool you down.
Yeah.
Now, of course, depending on the weather, it's cold and damp here today in York, and I wouldn't really recommend people to eat salads right now. I think it's much a better idea to have something warm like soup, baked foods, you know, warming foods. But if you're menopausal, you need to balance those easily digested foods with something that's energetically cooling. So we give out lists of foods. And this is where, interestingly, it does merge with Western ideas lately. They've been saying, try having more soya products. It's because they're yin nourishing. Tofu particularly is very good.
Is it not? Yeah, tofu is not something that's usually on my radar.
Lots of people don't like it. It can be made to be interesting, though. So it can be used in curries. I mean, see, if you have a curry, a cooling thing that they put on the side of it is banana, yogurt, cucumber. Those are all things that will cool down a curry. And salt and pepper. Salt's cooling, pepper's warming. So you can adjust the temperature of your food. It's not just about taste, it's about temperature as well. And I think we know all these things traditionally in ourselves. We understand them, but we don't know why we're using these things. They're just kind of habits now.
What I found, you talk about salt being cooling, but actually that's if I wanted a hot flush, all I have to do is have something salty and away I go.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, particularly for me, nighttime is the time when I'll get overheated if and not during the day at all. And to be honest, it's not even that bad anymore. But if I have something salty, I'll wake with palpitations and in a sweat at that point, some point in the night.
That's interesting. So what is it that's making your body react to the salt?
Don't know. Yes. But anyway, you can think about that, June.
I will have a think about that. Indeed, I will.
Get back to me on that one. But it's interesting. You talk about, the fact that your hot flushes, insomnia, anxiety, depression, you kind of lump them all together as being something that maybe would we be talking about a particular formulaic treatment that would apply in that situation?
Well, we tend to tailor the treatment to the individual person. So this is the tricky thing, because we say that, and then we say, well, yes, but you can use this point for that particular problem with a person. So yeah, I mean, for sleep, I often advise people to massage the inside corner of the elbow. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh.
Just on the inside of the edge of the elbow there. You go over the what's the name of that bone? Memory is another menopausal symptom.
Well, it's the medial epicondyle.
That's it. Epicondyle did come to mind. I'm not going to say that because I might be wrong. Yes.
Think golfer's elbow. Yes. Where are we on that bony point?
Yes, you go just over into the fleshy part. That's a really good one for just helping calm the mind and get you ready for sleeping. And of course, getting away from electronic gadgets and all of that useful stuff.
Can we just talk about acupressure then? Because, of course, acupuncture is something that you would have to go and see a professional to get to access to. But I know from my own perspective, I've treated, there are people that are not suited to needling, and therefore you might use acupressure.
I think you're right. A lot of people just feel very nervous of needles. And I think once they realize that how gentle they are, they're usually okay. But certainly if it's going to create more anxiety, that's not what you want. So you need to work up to it. And this is where I use magnets a lot. I have little tiny, I've got some here actually. They're little tiny magnets on a strip, on a see-through little, you can hardly see it, they're so tiny, but they're 800 Gauss, which is quite strong. And they can just sit there on the point and do the work equivalent to a needle over a period of a couple of days. You don't want to leave them on longer than 2 or 3 days.
So, of course, we're not suggesting people go out and buy these things and apply.
No. They need to be prescribed by a proper person.
But acupressure, I mean, I don't think we can do ourselves harm by acupressuring ourselves, can we, June? You're frowning.
I think it would have to be advised and under supervision of someone.
Which points?
Really, yeah. I mean, there are books out there that are teach yourself acupressure books, so we can't legislate for what people might do once they read those books. And the people who've written them have done it in all good faith and, you know, very responsible practitioners. But I do think it's tricky. It's tricky because I myself advise people, and like I said, when they go home, you're never really quite sure what they're going to do with your advice. And you can't do harm too much, although, I mean, I suppose you can overdo things, you know. If you take to rubbing an acupuncture point, I mean, this is the case in point with earrings, you know, it was the Chinese pirates, apparently, who wanted to have better vision across the oceans. So they got the acupuncture point on the ear for the eye punctured on a permanent basis, which of course would work for a few days, but then it would wear off and then that point is rendered useless. That's the story. I have no idea whether it's true or not. It's like all these mythology, you know, somebody got shot in the shoulder with an arrow and then they discovered that acupuncture point cured poor shoulder issues. You know, it's like, yeah, well, who knows? Thousands of years ago, this might have happened, and the stories just get passed down, don't they?
Well, that's true, isn't it? I mean, I suppose I do like the idea of things that we can do to help ourselves. But you're quite right. It's important that because the heart meridian, you know, is contraindicated. Certain points are contraindicated if you had heart trouble, say, for instance. So it is important that you are seeking appropriate advice if you're going to be using these kinds of treatments, but that knowing that it's out there and that there are things that can help us. So what about treatment of bladder kinds of issues, genital urinary? Is this something that you have experience of?
Yeah, now we're talking about the lower abdomen. There's so much more because, of course, the bowels get disrupted, don't they? Things get generally drier on the inside and on the outside. So this is where the yin nourishing foods come in again. They can help moisten things. So I'm a lifelong avoider of bananas because of my treatment of children.
Oh yeah.
And trying to keep bananas out of my house while my children were so very snotty.
What's
because
happening with bananas?
Bananas can create more moisture in the body, and if you're already really snotty, it's not terribly helpful. But see, for menopause, they could be useful.
Oh, I have a banana every day, June. Love a banana.
Well, there you go. You're doing something right. So they're cooling and moistening, you see, and that's why they grow in hot, dry places.
Oh, that's
see, nature provides, you know, they're not really meant to be shipped to cold, damp countries like ours, but they are at the moment. So take advantage of that. You know, things that are cooling and nurturing like that are useful.
Forgive me for my ignorance, but in terms of food energetics, are cooling foods always cold, or can we warm them up?
Well, the method of cooking them does alter them, yes. And if people are really, really keen on having bananas, they can reduce the dampness by baking them.
Oh, wow.
So they'll still have the goodness in them, the potassium and the fiber will still be there, but they will be sort of pre-digested, so they're not so hard to digest, so that makes it easier for people.
So that change, that changes the properties then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So to cool ourselves down with food, bananas you mentioned, soy you mentioned. What else did you mention?
Yes, Davrick Leggett, he's one of my colleagues. He's written a lovely book called Helping Ourselves. And
Oh,
it's got lovely lists for all sorts of different aspects. And it's got a list of not so common foods and common foods, you know, quite a variety of foods in the back, and their properties and which meridians they influence.
oh,
So yeah, so what I normally say to people who are getting hot flushes is try and cut out things that
oh,
are heating
oh,
things. Yeah, so spicy things often, but some spices are very good for moving stuck energy, and you
yeah.
might need some moving. But yeah, alcohol, as you mentioned before,
Mm.
different kinds of alcohol are more heating than others.
Oh,
Wine, for example, is more heating than beer, and then spirits are yet more heating than wine.
oh,
So I mean, it's got to do with the amount of alcohol levels in it, I
oh,
think.
oh.
Chocolate, of course, bless it.
What's
Lovely,
that
lovely.
chocolate?
Everybody loves chocolate,
Oh,
but it can be very heating. Coffee and tea, the caffeine and the tannin can take energy up. They're very much an upward kind of moving thing. Although coffee actually moves the bowels too, so you know, it moves things downwards
well,
too.
yeah. Well, so this is the fascinating thing, isn't it? With
Mm.
regards to food, we are going a little bit off, but still talking about this energy management, really. I was listening to a podcast only this week about the fact that you and I, June, are more likely to share DNA than we are to have even one gut microbe that is the same. Did
Wow.
you know this? So yeah,
I
it's an absolute fact that we could be fourth cousins. In fact, we might well be, but
Yep.
but the likelihood of us sharing the same gut microbiome microbiota is far greater removed, and so this is the thing, that not only are foods different in the way in which they are inherently, but in fact the way in which they react with us as individuals. And so this, you know, what we talk about, an individualized approach to
Mm.
wellness, an individualized approach to health, is actually, you know, the way that we should be moving. We can't do the same thing for everyone and it have the same
Mm.
result. So,
Yeah.
you know, so some of the thinking around nutrition is going to be good for a lot of people, but perhaps not for everybody.
Nothing's
Um,
good for everybody.
so, well,
Exactly
this
right.
is it. And so finding
Yeah.
what works for you
Mm.
by experimentation, I think, seems to be the only way to do it. I know that there are some tests available, but still, these have been shown to be limited,
Mm.
you know, in the help that they provide. But the particular doctor that was talking was fortunate enough to be a researcher and came upon some health troubles and just ended up being his own guinea pig, you know, and found a formula that worked for him. But he was very clear that the formula that worked for him wouldn't necessarily work for everybody because of this fact. And so I think this is, the more we can get in touch with the way that our bodies react with situations, with people, with food, with the weather, you know, I mean, whatever. And that really does come back to this traditional philosophies that have been around for centuries, where people were, that's how they evolved, through experimentation, you know, through trial and error,
Mm.
not through randomized controlled trials.
No, it's observation, and that's true science as well, you see. I mean, it's actually, it upsets me when people say, well, I believe in science and your stuff isn't scientific. I go, well, yes, it is. It's its own kind of science, and it is about observation. You
Mm.
observe constantly what's going on, and you can generalize about some things, but a lot of things do have to be, and this is why we take the pulses and we look at the tongue
Mm.
every treatment, and I take the pulses throughout a treatment to see how a person is reacting to the treatment, because things do change very quickly. When you start moving energy and balancing things out, you can really feel the difference in the pulses, and you can get the person's own feedback because they can sense things going on. But we're not accustomed to listening to our bodies much, are we, in this culture? And I think we're starting to, but it takes some time and some practice.
And so getting in tune, diving deeper inside of ourselves is a good thing.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about the bladder, I don't think I properly answered that. I do work on the abdomen, particularly. I do cupping on the abdomen, which is another part of traditional Chinese medicine, but very gentle. I never leave horrible big red marks on people. I feel that's not necessary. And actually, you can draw out sometimes cold. You know, this is one of the weird things. Cold can get into the body in the abdomen very easily and can sit there for years. If we've had abdominal surgery, if we had a cesarean section, or if we've had, you know, a chill on our tummy when we were very small, it can get in there and interfere, and it doesn't show up till years later. So the root cause of hot flushes might actually be cold in the abdomen. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would do, is I'd look at the lower abdomen and work on that. But there's also this thing called irritable bladder syndrome.
Yes, yeah.
That a doctor I met years ago, back in the 90s, was one of the researchers into that, and he discovered that it was a lack of progesterone
that caused the bladder to be irritable.
Irritable bladder can be a factor.
A connection between connective tissue and bladder function, and then the hormone shifts is very real. And and so, I mean, you know, the idea for me that replacing that to a certain extent with replacement therapy to protect those structures, the collagen fibers, the structures, go some way. But we know that the levels are not going to be the same as they were when we were in our reproductive years. So that there are still things that we need to be doing, and definitely the pelvic floor exercises from a physio perspective is something that can be very beneficial. And I know that from an acupuncture point of view, we can kind of tone the bladder, can't we, with some points, tone the bladder and change, you know, urgency, frequency type conditions with acupuncture. And also, what about vaginal, anything to do with vaginal issues?
Well, yes. I mean, the thing about the spleen, which I haven't even gone into yet, my favorite subject, it's to do with the energy of the spleen. In Western medicine is about red blood cells, right? But in Chinese medicine, it's to do with the absorption of energy from the food that we take in and making it available to the rest of the system. But it also holds things up and keeps things flowing in the blood vessels. So anybody suffering from a damaged spleen energy can suffer from prolapses, from hemorrhoids, varicose veins, this kind of waking up late at night and not feeling able to sleep and then being drowsy in the morning. That kind of thing is a very characteristic spleen situation. And often people will have food sensitivities going along with that. So yeah, any problems with prolapses or pain or tension down there, I would look at the liver and the spleen meridians. There are points on the leg, on the lower leg, that address that particular area, that are in the liver family of points.
Yeah.
And the spleen, obviously, you know, to hold things up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I like those they're kind of general rules of thumb, aren't they? You know, the principles. There's the element theory, the wood, the water, you know, does that feed into that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love the 5 elements. That was my original introduction to acupuncture through kinesiology. And that's what got me interested in studying acupuncture. Fabulous grounding in TCM, which kind of historically moved away from the 5 elements and kind of looked at more, because they brought it over to the UK in the 70s. And the people who brought it over were going, well, I don't know whether this kind of philosophy stuff, the background stuff, is gonna wash with Western medical doctors. So we'll dilute it a little bit and make it more palatable.
Oh, okay.
And that trend has continued, sadly. And I feel like it's become more and more reduced to give us a set of points that are trigger points, for instance. Give us a set of points that are good for shoulder pains and hip pains and things like this. And I think you lose so much when you reduce things to that kind of level, although they can still have an effect. But the 5 elements is fabulous, because you've got the wood, which is the liver and the gallbladder over in the east. And the wood feeds the fire, which is at the top in the north, which is, to them, their maps are upside down, or our maps are upside down. And then you go around to the earth element. The fire feeds the earth, because all the minerals from the burnt wood go in to nourish the soil. And then the soil, the earth feeds the metal element, which is, and you get precious minerals and crystals and things out of the earth. And then you go round to water, whereas the minerals give the water life and vitality. And then the water nourishes the wood. And so it goes round like that. And that flow goes on all throughout our lives. I mean, we start at birth with the 8 extraordinary meridians forming the little fetus. And they're still there inside us after we've been born, but they're not that functional anymore. They're just kind of dormant in the background. But we still have points that work through those 8 extra meridians. And they help, especially at times like this with the menopause. You can work very deeply on things instead of just superficially. So
Well, like all these things, we could dig deeper.
Many layers.
Many layers. But there are some general principles that we can use to help people. And so thank you so much. I think it's a really good place for us to call a halt to proceedings for today. Yeah. But I think we could talk again in the future if you were free.
I'd love that. Yeah.
And thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you.
You're welcome.
Really enjoyable.
It's a lot more fun when there's 2 of you, put it that way.
Absolutely. Well, I hope people get something out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Thank you so much for your time,
Okay.
June.
Thank you.